me hear you. So what do you think of the upgrades, eh? Not bad. I've got an iPad thing. I think that's about it. And I've got opening music. Hit it. Well, it's reassuring that some things remain the same. What about Simon on sound? Come on. Right. So cut it, Simon. Cut it, Simon. So it's that one. Sit. Right, so just to let you know what else we've got coming up. So at 1:30, we've got RJ McCall will be here, one of the original architects of modern gaming, from the Amiga to the 3DO. So join us at 1:30. I'm then back at 3 p.m. with Jeff Minter. That'll be fun. He says here, cult icon of British game design. On Sunday, so tomorrow at 12, when you're all hungover so you don't turn up, it's Matt Householder, a veteran of Atari, who helped create the golden age of arcades. And then I'm with Simon Phipps at 2 p.m., who you'll all know as Rick Dangerous's dad. So he's here at 2 p.m., but that's all to come. But for now, I think a lot of people are very excited about this. So it's no exaggeration to say that these guys helped shape 30 years of adventure gaming. From the Broken Sword Beneath the Steel Sky, please welcome Charles Cecil and Tony Warriner. Take a seat, gents.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Just slide the little thing up.
Yeah. Hello.
There we go. I'm going to go right kind of back, because we obviously know the collaboration and what it's created and the impact that that's had. Let's go back to the very early days, and I think that this will hopefully provoke a story about when you got a cassette through the post. Let's start there.
Can we go before then?
We can go back to the beginning of time if you want, Charles. You're the man.
The beginning of time. That's actually a very good expression. It really is the beginning of time. We're talking about 1981. And my journey started when I left school and I was going to be an engineer, and I was sponsored by Ford. And one of my fellow engineers, Richard Turner, we used to go and play arcade games with a pint. In the days when you had the flat tables, they were absolutely brilliant. So you could plonk your pint down and have a game of Space Invaders or Galaxians or whatever. And then one day he said, you like telling stories. I've just started a home computer company. Why don't you write adventures? He said, you write them, I'll code them. So I did, and he did. And I was at university, and it was absolutely brilliant. They're really not very good games at all, but it was a wonderful introduction to games right at the very, very beginning.
So you went to university in Manchester, and then
I did.
How did you? So, at what point did you go over to Hull?
Well, he was the very definition of a bedroom coder. So at school, his mother or his parents had said, you can either have a ZX81 or you can have an 18th birthday party.
Yeah.
And he went for the ZX81, which I'm delighted.
Quite a night in and a ZX81.
Exactly. And so he ran the company. We were both sponsored by Ford, so we were working for Ford. But he ran the company, or we ran the company when he invited me to get involved, from his parents' house at 396 James Reckitt Avenue in Hull.
Good memory. So, Tony, back then did you have an 18th birthday party?
Not that I remember.
Right. You're coding away, and back then, this was the days where you could fit a chess game into 1K of, memory, wasn't it? Like, tell me, what got you coding and?
What got me coding is just an alternative to school, really. I mean, you could do.
You were a rugby fan, weren't you?
I loved rugby. Yeah.
He hated it.
We were talking about this last night. We used to, you have to play rugby at school. So there's like four of us had a little computer club in the corner of the rugby field, and we just stand there talking about computers.
Sounds dead cool, Tony.
Yeah. We were the cool crowd. But yeah, I mean, coding, it was just this amazing new world that opened up in the early 80s, and it was, everything was drab in those days, and school was awful, and but coding was good, and you could make a game, and it was great.
So how did the collaboration that eventually leads to Revolution Software and kind of all the memories that everyone has got, how did you sort of first come to know of Tony, Charles? Like, how did?
So what happened was that Richard's company, our company, Arctic, did really, really well to begin with. And then big companies like US Gold, Ocean, Activision to an extent came in. And we were just really, really unprofessional. And some of the games, I mean, we were talking about this last night. I remember on the Commodore 64 when Impossible Mission, first arrived. And we looked at it and we realized that we were just we were just being swamped. But then also you had British companies like Ultimate, who were just so much better than everybody else. It was there were some others as well, like but we were really being left behind, and then this tape came through the post called Obsidian, and it was kind of the quality of and it was really extraordinary, and it was written by a local lad, a fellow called Tony Warriner, who was just around the corner. So we got back in touch with him straight away and called him in and said, come and talk to us because we'd love to publish your game.
Do you remember that phone call? Because, it would have been like on the landline, wouldn't it? Your mum would have answered. Maybe?
I'm not sure it was. It might have been a letter. Yeah. Those
letter?
Those are the days when Charles would dictate a letter to the secretary who would type it out and then post it. I think that's what that was. But so I went over. And we actually got Arctic from the phone book, the Yellow Pages.
Wow.
Like game publishers.
And you must have met for the first time then and talked about the kind of things that Tony wanted to do. How did you describe your vision of the?
We have different memories, so we didn't really talk about it from my perspective. Now, this was 40 years ago, exactly 40 years ago. So, we don't maybe remember quite what happened precisely, but my memory is that Tony turned up. I think you were dropped off by your parents, by your dad.
Yes.
Oh.
And we talked about publishing the game, and then took him to the pub. And my memory is that he didn't say a thing, that he was completely silent. But we gave him a bit of paper to sign, and he signed it, and his life was his life was ours from that point onwards.
I actually found that contract recently. I've still got it. The royalty was 30%.
Really?
Yeah.
God, no wonder you're so rich.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. I just went straight from the pub to the Porsche dealership and said, "Look at this," and they said, "We'll advance you a Porsche."
And how much that 30% did you actually receive?
There was a cheque for 600 quid, wasn't there? I think.
I didn't realise you got paid 600 quid.
I think I got 600 quid in the end.
Well, that's not too bad.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Charles.
So, Charles, it's clear there's some financial tension between the two of you. When you were sort of talking...
No, because I didn't get paid 600 quid, so I'm wondering why he did, because I was writing all these games. I think I might have a word with Richard and ask him. Having said that, I don't have a contract.
Yeah.
So in theory, I own the games.
The accounting wasn't good, Charles.
It wasn't, was it? Anyway, sorry.
That's all right. So when you were looking at these games, you mentioned like the games of like Ultimate, and they just looked so cool and they were just so much better than every. But interestingly, that's not the direction necessarily that you went in. So because you could argue that the direction you went in, sort of its roots are in the text adventure genre. What was it? Was it you that made the decision as kind of the main man to say, I want to pursue making narrative-driven games more easy to do? Because I was turned off by text adventures because you were trying to go north. I don't know north. Go forward. I don't know forward. Go or get lost. It was hard work. What was that? Where's that where it came from?
Yeah. No. What happened was that Tony and I worked at Arctic. Basically, crashed, and. I don't know if it went bankrupt or not, but it was a really depressing time. And in the end, we were able to salvage the company, but that was the end. And so what had happened is that there was this very fine game from Arctic called World Cup Football. And we got a call from a fellow from US Gold called Tim Chaney, and he said, "We want you to write the World Cup game for Mexico '86." And I was really astonished because somebody that had written a lot of games for us called John Rittman had actually written Match Day for Ocean. And it was way better. I mean, our game was pretty good for 1982, but Match Day was probably about 84. And so it was 2 years as things were moving very fast. And I said to Tim, I said, "Surely you can use Match Day." And he went, No, we can't. So they basically took a game that was 4 years old, Mexico '86, 4 years old, and put it. And Jeff Brown then, who was running US Gold, turned up in his Testarossa. You remember better than I.
Yeah, it was a red Testarossa. I think the number plate was GB8 or something.
Yeah.
But they'd never seen a Ferrari in Brands Burton before.
No, I'm not sure I'd ever seen a Ferrari either.
They still talk about it, I think.
Yeah. So, and he then paid us to do this game, and it was. I mean, we knew it wasn't right because, but anyway, the game didn't get very well reviewed. I think that's probably.
But they'd run out of time. They had their own version. They were writing a real game and ran out of time.
Oh, that's probably it. Yeah.
So then they thought, oh dear, it's 2 months
As
to
you
the
can
World Cup.
imagine, we had to finish it on time because to deliver. Anyway, the point being that Richard had then sold the rights to a guy called Jeff Young for nothing. And Jeff Young realized that a lot of the source code that had been used for Arctic World Cup, which he'd bought for £100, was the same. And he sued US Gold, which was a really dirty thing to do. And US Gold then withheld the money from us, and that was kind of the end. So, but because of the relationship with US Gold, I then started a development company called Paragon, based in London, and Tony came and worked with me, and we did conversions. And then after that, Tony and he went off to Cascade and did various bits and pieces, and I went and worked for Activision. But there was always that desire, and as a publisher, I found it incredibly frustrating that I had the responsibility of sorting out games that went wrong, but I never had the sort of pleasure and joy of contributing to games that went well. And it was extraordinarily frustrating. So when Activision, as it was then in 1989, started to crash, brought down by absolute incompetence from the American side. This is an earlier version of Activision, not the Activision from now. It just felt like a perfect opportunity to go back into development. And a friend of mine called Sean Brennan, who I'd met through Telecomsoft, and then he was working for Mirrorsoft, which was Robert Maxwell's company. Robert Maxwell, for those who don't know, was a publishing tycoon. His daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, is fairly infamous now. And anyway, so Sean came to see me and he said, "Look, if you want to start a company, we'd love to support you. Obviously, we're not giving you a blank check, but we would love to see anything that you come up with." And Tony and I had stayed in touch, and this seemed like a fantastic opportunity to get back together again.
And so what was if you were to kind of sum up at that point, so you had the chance to put together Revolution, this new software company. For the first time, you weren't just porting other people's things or developing other people's. What was the driving sort of ambition at that point? Was it narrative driven to just empower the player a little bit more?
I mean, I guess you guys have been at Activision. You were distributing Sierra titles, weren't you? So you knew the market was good, and obviously you had your adventure games back at Arctic. So I mean, I guess all those things came together, and we said adventure is what we should do. It's potentially a good market. So we got together in Wales, wasn't it? And we played Leisure Suit Larry. And we said, can we beat this? Can we beat it from a story point of view, and can we beat it technically? And we kind of said, yeah, let's go for it. And so that was the genesis.
I think actually it was from my perspective. My memory is that it was King's Quest, and it was like, oh my God, this is so cliched. I'm sorry, I know that it'll be bigly, but like King Graham of Daventry, please. And you know, and the gameplay was that if you missed something on the first screen, you'd get to the end of the game, but you wouldn't know why you couldn't proceed. And it just felt that it had been, from my view, it had been kind of bogged down in an old, you know, and things should move forward. And actually, when LucasArts were talking about this, they were saying exactly the same thing, that they just felt they could do so much better than the games that were being produced at that time. And Roberta Williams was brilliant, but you know, she'd kind of got into this hole of, and we felt that we, as newcomers, we could add a level of humor, we could be more dynamic, we could write puzzles that made more sense. And so that was very much the ambition. And also virtual theatre. Talk about virtual theatre.
Well, the thing was that we'd all played things like the level 9 text adventures, which were massively more sophisticated than the American you know, graphic adventures. So I mean, we had that to look at as well. But virtual theatre, yeah. I mean, when we looked at King's Quest and Legend of Larry, we realised that, you know, it was just like, here's the screen. The game is just the screen. And we thought, wouldn't it be fun to have more like, you know, like Gargoyle games? They did like Dunderak and Turn and Org and all that kind of stuff. And we thought, let's combine that sort of technology, that kind of idea, with an adventure game. So, you know, virtual theatre was the idea of characters leaving the screen and wandering off and doing things.
Almost like the early days of a NPC, like a...
Yeah, it's right, very beginning.
Almost very early, yeah. So I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned there about, I think it was you said about the puzzles need to be, I don't know, they don't need to be easier, they just need to make more sense. And if you look at the start of Beneath a Steel Sky, where Foster's just got to get out of a cell, right? So it's like Dizzy. You just got to get out of a cell. But there's a sense that when you sort of play those opening moments, you're being taught something. So it's almost like it's like the sort of tutorial as well about how to use the game. And when I tried to do, like, I don't know, Police Quest was a bugger. You're just walking around because you don't know what to do. So is that important to have those early puzzles as tutorials?
Yeah, it gets people into the game, you know. And there's like you know, you're in one room, so you can't wander around and get lost. All you got to do is pull the thing off the wall, and it sets it, and then you can escape. And by the time you've done that, you've learnt the entire UI, and you know the structure of the game. And then you're in another section with 3 rooms and like 6 puzzles. And by the time you've done that, you're into the bigger world, you know. So, but there's not even a need for a tutorial because it's so straightforward, you know.
But the problem is that we then ran out of ideas or how you could use virtual theatre, didn't we?
Well, that was the flaw, yeah.
It was the flaw. But let me tell you, we were really proud because Lure of the Temptress, as you say, there was this idea that you could send your character Rat Pouch off, and it was born out of text adventures, because if you remember, it would go, tell Rat Pouch to, and this was all Tony's, and then it would have a list of the verbs, and so you could put together, and then you could watch him go off and do it. Yeah. Now, we were really proud of this, and we thought that Mirrorsoft were going to be very impressed. So we'd arranged to do the presentation. The big day came, and I'd previously, when I was at Activision, I'd bought myself a 386 PC, which was beautiful. It just was so powerful, and I gave it to these guys to develop on, and they were in Hull, and our presentation was in London. So the plan was to meet in London, because I was living down there, and I told them that because I loved this PC so much, and nothing could go wrong with it, that they had to strap it into the back seat, okay, and put a little blanket round and just make it feel, nothing could go wrong. So they did that, and that was fine. And Tony and Dave Sykes, who was the other founder, drove down, and they arrived, and we kind of talked about what we were going to do. We had a glass of wine, we had dinner, and back in those days, we're talking about 92, 91, 92. No, sorry, we're talking about 1991. And in those days, people used to smash car windows and steal the radios. And we woke up the next morning, we'd drunk a little bit too much wine, which was really stupid. Woke up, and I saw that Tony's car, somebody had smashed the window. And so I knew that they would have taken the radio, which was really irritating. And then I remembered we'd forgotten to take the PC from the back seat. And it was like, oh my God, because this was about $3,000, and that was $3,000 for, 30 years ago. If that PC had gone, that would have been the end. That, we wouldn't have been able to. And I kind of went white and ran down, and indeed the radio had been stolen, but the PC was still sitting strapped in on the back seat. So there you go.
So hang on, did that PC have like the only copy of source code on it as well? Or
Well,
something?
my version of the story is it
You
did,
should add
but
that
I'm
into
not
the
sure,
story.
I'm not sure that that's true.
We weren't exactly backing things up onto the cloud in those days. There might have been some backups, but nothing very recent. So yeah, we would have been in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Well, that said,
I think the sophistication, Tony, was that Tony's networking system was that he was on one table, Dave was on another, and they would throw 3.5-inch floppies at each other and catch them. And that was the network system, wasn't it?
That was the network system, yeah.
Well,
we had a big cupboard thing with like little slots for like each room had a disk in it with like so the folders were cupboards, little tiny slot things. It was like a huge against one of the walls.
Well, talking of floppy disks, so ported to the Amiga, you're looking at like 20 odd disks to run a game. And I'm just interested, Tony, from your perspective, what was the challenges of porting over, say, Broken Sword over to different platforms? Because it was running on the Game Boy Advance as well, wasn't it?
Well, much later, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be about 96, that, wouldn't it?
I mean, the challenge was, I guess we were always understaffed, so we didn't have a network and we didn't really know what we were doing, and our designs were a bit sort of flaky as well. So we were just on the edge all the time. We were coding in parallel, so the PC version would be going forward and the Atari ST version would be going forward, and then the Amiga was slightly behind it, and they were just, we were just coding forward. There was no structure, and no one had written that kind of game on those kind of machines before. So it's not like you can go on the internet and watch a YouTube video on how to do an adventure game. We were making it up, so it was all on the edge.
And there weren't other developers doing that, not in the same way. We were talking about this last night, because Tony, by the way, has written a brilliant book about all of this called Revolution...
Quest for Game Development Glory.
Quest for Game... It's really, really good. So if you're at all interested in any of this stuff, available from all good bookshops?
No, just me.
All right, just him. But what we're talking about is that, because he's working with Stuart, I don't know his surname now. Stu, absolutely brilliant pixel artist. And we we put an advert in, because we're based in Hull, in the Hull Daily Mail, asking for artists. And a few people came through. We had this guy called Steve Oads, who was a clerk at one of the local companies, Kalamazoo, and who's the background guy? I've forgotten his name now. Adam Tween. And these people kind of arrived, and they were really good. And we kind of assumed that there were plenty of people that good. But actually, we'd managed to find these extraordinary people who had a passion, and through the sort of serendipity, I guess, of they were looking for us, we were looking for them, and they probably thought there were loads of games companies. But as Tony said, you looked it up in the Yellow Pages. Most of you, maybe you will remember the Yellow Pages. I don't know, but it's just so different to how you do it today.
Yeah. I mean, Steve Oads. I mean, if you played Broken Sword, I mean, he drew an animated George. I mean, that's a serious piece of work. I mean, he's probably one of the best pixel artists in the world, really. Top 10 pixel artists in the world. And we just put an advert in the newspaper.
But definitely by 96, I mean, it's fair to say there's a lot more adventure games around than there was in 91. Just to talk about the narrative here, what do you think it is about George and Nico's, you mentioned George there, George and Nico's story, the conspiracy thriller and the relationship and their dynamic, particularly in like the subsequent Broken Swords. What is it about their story and the personality? I mean, you mentioned before how you'd watch you'd play King's Quest and there's no personality between the players. What is it about their story that gripped people so much, do you think, from a narrative point of view? It's probably one for you, Charles.
Go on.
Shall I go first?
Go on then.
The way that women were depicted in computer games during the 80s was really shocking. Really shocking. I think from any perspective. And that's not from a politically correct perspective. And I think it kind of worried us. So we wanted strong female protagonists, not because it was, because it was politically correct, but just because it meant there'd be a better story, and a more mature story, and a more interesting story. And if you don't mind, let me go back, if I may, to
I don't mind.
Our first game, Lure of the Temptress, which kind of is slightly ironic because it's such a sexualized name. And the way that came about was that we was the working title Vengeance or some crappy name like that?
Vengeance, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, really crappy. But we knew it wasn't going to be the final, but we had to come up with a name. And the head of marketing at Mirrorsoft was a woman called Alison Beasley, and she, as we approached completion, she said, right, you need to come up with some names. So, we came up with a load of names. And at the bottom, I put Lure of the Temptress. In brackets, this is just a joke. Now, one of the things I've learned is never, ever tell a marketing person anything you don't want them to take seriously. Because, of course, she came back and she said, we love the name Lure of the Temptress. And so I phoned her back and I said, look, Alison, we can't call it Lure of the Temptress. And she said, you have to. I went, we can't. There are two major problems. One, the game has no luring. And two, there's no temptress. I swear to God. And do you know what she said? She said, can you put one in? Do you remember that?
And we said it'll cost you.
We said it'll cost you, and we had no money, and they said, okay. So we completely... So if anybody's played the game, and they notice that at the beginning, the whole idea of a temptress is completely shoehorned in, that's why.
It kind of steps up to the temptress at the end, doesn't it?
It does.
It goes into temptress mode.
Yeah.
And Lure the Temptress, tell me if I'm wrong, but is that actually technically the first time you used the virtual theatre? Is that rather than Beneath a Steel? Is that right? That was the first time?
It was the first one, yeah.
What do you think now, looking at sort of games that are AI procedurally generated and the whole way things have gone now, what do you think of what you innovated back then is kind of part of the DNA of how people make games now? I don't think that's too big a statement to make, hopefully not.
That's very generous. The thing, of course, is that the constraints of the medium were extraordinarily empowering in a sort of contradictory way, because there was only so much that you could do. And now with the game engines like Unity, kids are coming out of university and they've got so much power that it's actually bewildering. It's like a blank piece of paper. What on earth do you do? Whereas we had you mentioned the 1K chess. I mean, 1K chess is phenomenal, and only a British programmer could have written a game of chess in 1K. And this guy, he was called David Horn, was really frustrated because it couldn't do en passant. Like what?
Yeah.
And
that's when you switch the thing with the castle with
No. En passant is if you've got two pawns and you go up, you can then go diagonally and take the pawn in a strange way.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was very frustrated, and we became, for tight code, we became the best programmers in the world. Without a shadow of a doubt. Which is why companies like ARM, which of course produces all of or designs the chips that go into our phones, came from Acorn and the BBC Micro, and so we innovated. But the extraordinary thing is we didn't innovate because, we saw it as a career. We innovated because it was really fun, and it was just amazing. And Tony, you're much better off talking about, the way that programmers talk to each other and shared information. And
well, I mean, I guess if you look at the 90s and the 80s as well, I mean, what was good was that the teams were small and the programmers and the artists sat together and worked together. And when everyone fused together perfectly, you'd get something that was bigger than what you would expect from the component parts. It was, I mean, that's where the Steel Skies come from, and the Breton Swords and the Sensible Soccers and the Cannon Fodders. They came from that way of working. That very small team with constraints. Financial constraints and technical constraints, and time constraints as well. But you could innovate and you could do something new and make a game that people are still talking about 40 years later. And I think the problem at the moment is if people are trying to take shortcuts by using generative AI and things like that, the games are slightly soulless in comparison to what we were producing back then. That's the problem. I mean, they're corporate games done for a reason, which is to earn dividends for shareholders. It's a different thing, and I think something's been lost. But I think a lot of the way that we used to work is coming back again. So it's maybe come full circle 40 years later.
Well, it's interesting to hear you talk about this. I talk to a lot of people who've worked in television and film, sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, across those eras. And one of the things that I hear all the time from people is how the constraints of television and film production back then used to create innovative, creative solutions, that it made you think more creatively about how to do something because you couldn't just press a button. That's interesting that you felt the same. Yeah,
it's coming. It's that way of thinking and working is definitely coming back. But as an aside, I was reading today about the film. I don't know if anyone's seen it. One Battle After Another, the thing that's out at the moment. Really, really great film. But apparently, it was shot on VistaVision film, which no one's done for like 40 years or something. But they've done it for a reason, to get a certain feel and a certain way of working.
So I suppose I have to talk about, and particular people have asked me to ask you about it, but when you came to do Beyond a Steel Sky, how much were you focused on updating it for a modern audience, terrible phrase, and how much were you focused on honouring the original? Was there a tension there or not? Or?
Yeah, of course there was a tension. Right. And Broken Sword is bigger, a lot bigger than Beneath the Steel Sky, but Beneath the Steel Sky has a particularly passionate audience. Yeah. And it was really important to try not to offend them, but also to write a game that would appeal to a more modern audience. So there was a tension. And I thought back, and one of the puzzles that I was most proud of was one, for anybody who's played Beneath the Steel Sky, there's a point where you talk to a Yorkshire factory owner called Gilbert Lamb, and he's very proud of the fact that he has the last beaver coat. I think it is coat. The last beaver in the world made his coat.
I think that was the humour. Yeah.
Anyway,
beavers.
Anyway, but he would walk backwards and forwards because we found that it was quite difficult to actually use virtual theatre for games, for puzzles. So what he would do is he'd walk backwards and forwards, get into the lift or the elevator, because we had to make it American friendly, and go down to his apartment. And what you could do is you could go into Link and you could change his permissions so that he could no longer use his, you gave it to yourself, so that he could no longer use his card to call the elevator, and it meant that you got access. And that felt to me like a really dynamic puzzle, because you were changing the state of the world. And I was excited to do this through a link hacking system, which, of course, uses Scratch, if anybody knows Scratch, the idea of moving blocks around. And I think it worked really well. And my regret with Beyond the Steel Sky is that we didn't make more of that, because it was such a strong component. And at its heart, it was what virtual theatre in 2020 or whenever the game was written, should be. The idea that you can change the world, and because you have the power to do so through a degree of AI, then the characters would respond. So if we ever do a Beyond or Back to the Steel Sky, or whatever, then it would be very much this idea of going back, I think, to the virtual theatre, which was very much Tony's brainchild back in the 90s. I don't think I've answered the question at all, though, have I?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I do want to mention one more thing about it, which is I really like it in modern games where they do this, where you can press a button and you can see it as it was and then see it updated. So it goes from whatever it was originally, the 360p, I don't know, up to 4K. Which button do you prefer?
Oh, I see. Which version?
Yeah, which one would you rather?
Oh, I'm afraid I prefer the new one. So I think what you're referring to is that we did a 4K version of Broken Sword last year.
Yep.
September last year. And we redrew. We thought we were going to use AI, which Tony's talked so negatively about, and actually it really didn't work at all well. So we just used wonderful human animators to redraw, but also to put facial expressions in. In fact, I remember the first one that really excited me was drawn by Tony's wife Tanya. And it was an animation right at the very beginning, for anybody who knows Broken Sword, where George picks up the newspaper, and it's a really extravagant animation, and then he opens it and he looks at it. And what Tanya did is she put the eye movement in, so he looks and then he has a little glance. And the point is that how on earth could an AI ever understand that actually it's all about the human emotion? Yes, of course you've got virtual actors who copy what went before, but if you're talking about really beautiful pixel artwork and you're looking at, the sort of subtlety of eye movement, and what we do is we show people the game in 4K and they go, yeah, I remember that so well, and then you press the button and it goes down to 640-400, or the PlayStation resolution, which was even lower. And people are just blown away because they think they remember it in high resolution. So, yeah, no, high resolution, definitely. The other thing is that because there was so much going on, there wasn't the purity of the kind of pixel artwork that you see in games like, Urbex and games that are coming out now, and games of the time. And yes, Steve was a genius, but, he was having to cram so much into such a limited color palette. I think I'd go for the modern version.
And seeing as we're talking about artwork, it's just popped into my head now because I saw that is it Dave Gibbons who did all the intro comic stuff to Beneath the Steel Sky? And as soon as I saw it, because I was watching a walkthrough the other day, it looks like does anyone know like Doctor Who comics? Come on, of course you do. Yeah, just admit it. So Doctor Who comics of the 80s, Dave Gibbons used to do a lot of the artwork. And my God, does it look like some of that stuff. And it was so lovely. How did you get working with Dave Gibbons?
Well, Dave did the comic book for Beneath the Steel Sky.
Right, yeah,
it's absolutely beautiful, isn't it?
Really
I think
nice.
It's absolutely extraordinary. And later he worked with other people, so it's not quite Dave Gibbons to the same extent. But what had happened is that he wrote a comic book called, well, he drew a comic book and co-created a comic book called Watchmen, that many of you will know, with Alan Moore. And this was in the 80s, and it is extraordinary that I guess it's like the celebration here of the old games. It's as relevant now. People are still talking about Watchmen, they're still reading Watchmen, it still resonates. But at Activision, I thought it'd make a great game, so I got in touch with him. And it turned out that Dark Horse, who had signed the comic, had the rights, but we kind of stayed in touch. And the thing about an adventure game is you get these really long cutscenes at the beginning. And some of them go on. That was the other thing about Sierra. They were really proud of the fact they'd got one that went on for 10 minutes. It's like nothing really happened. It could have been done in 2 minutes. They didn't understand the fundamentals, which is, make it shorter, make it punchy. And with Beneath the Steel Sky, there was quite a lot of background, and it felt fantastic if we could get somebody of Dave's quality to draw it in a really punchy way as a comic book, and convey all that information and set the scene. And that's what he did. And I have to say, he was a real pleasure to work with. Really great guy.
And he's still working now. Tony, what's the process of you getting some artwork through? Because it would be quite large artwork, I'd imagine. And then putting that into different ports of the games.
Well, Dave, he lined the backgrounds for Beneath the Steel Sky. So, they would literally be done on paper. And then I think they would be scanned, wouldn't they?
Les Pace was.
Yeah, and then I think we tried to paint them in actual paint at first, and that didn't really work. Because I think we eventually scanned them in, and then they were coloured in digitally, But Steel Sky has quite an unusual look because we did it in a very strange way. It's this combination of painting and digital, so it's quite unique. But he did all of the lining for the backgrounds on Beneath Steel Sky. But when you're saying you look at Beneath Steel Sky and you look at the Watchmen and you look at the Doctor Who comics, you can tell it's the same guy, right? Oh, yeah. Right. Well, that's also what you lose when you're using AI and that sort of thing to cheat. That you don't have that kind of lineage that you recognise the artist's work, and that's the difference.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right, it's time for a regular spot that we do here. You won't know about this. I'm dropping it on you. I've asked ChatGPT to give me, you'll like this, to give me 4 random games that are kind of a little bit off the beaten track for Evolution. And I'm gonna say the name of the game, and I want you both to just give me, Tony, you might not work on all of these, I'm not sure, but I want you to just give me a couple of words that spring to mind. Got the format?
Yep.
Right.
A couple of words.
Right. In Cold Blood, 2000. 3D espionage thriller.
It's a huge game.
Huge game. Bob Keane.
Okay.
We worked with Bob Keane, who'd done it was at Pinewood Studios.
That Hellraiser, was it?
Hellraiser, yeah, he'd worked on Hellraiser.
The guy with the nails in his head.
Yeah, and brought a lot to that. Yeah.
Cool. Gold and Glory, The Road to El Dorado.
Some money.
Yeah, it was quite a good game, wasn't it?
It actually was, yeah. It was much better than it should have been, really.
I mean, Ubisoft. We worked with Ubisoft on that, and actually, I think it worked quite well, and it got good reviews, and
It's pretty good.
It's a film tie-in, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Cartoon, yeah.
Do you know, I'm completely failing. We haven't come up with the 2 words, though, have we? Money.
No.
Money, money, money.
We needed the money.
We need some money.
Okay, so speaking of money, Disney's The Jungle Book, Groove Party, a rhythm and dance game.
Not us.
Not us. ChatGPT doing well there. It says here, this is what ChatGPT says, very different from Cecil's usual adventure style.
Is this your secret game,
We did do
Charles?
some Disney game. We did Mulan. And we did an Ants, whatever it is. But I don't think we did it. It doesn't sound familiar
Look,
at
if
all.
ChatGPT says you did it...
We must have done it, mustn't we?
Must be.
Okay. Da Vinci Code 2006.
Ron Howard.
Ron Howard, yeah. Can I tell you my Ron Howard story?
Is it scandalous? Then, yeah.
Yeah, so the Da Vinci Code starts with an American coming to Paris, meeting with this kind of sassy French younger woman, and they almost get killed in a conspiracy involving the Knights Templar.
It's a good idea, isn't it?
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. So our fans are absolutely convinced that Ron Howard must have played Broken Sword and stolen all our ideas, which may or may not be true.
No, not Ron, because Ron was the director of the film.
Sorry. Yeah,
What's his name?
Dan
Dan
Brown.
Dan Brown. I
Dan
beg your
Brown.
pardon, Dan Brown.
Yeah.
So you think he played your game?
Well, I'm not saying that. No. But you're welcome to.
But you could draw your own conclusions.
So anyway, and you know, it's a pretty rotten book. Has anybody read it? Yeah, it's a pretty rotten book.
I've heard
isn't
it's
it?
rubbish, yeah.
Yeah. And if you want even worse, then read Labyrinth by Kate Moss. I mean, in the first couple of pages, it's like she cuts herself, and the blood dropped and exploded like fireworks on Guy Fawkes night. It's like, what?
That would make a good point and click.
Anyway, so my story is that I'm a little bit competitive, but, you know, good for him. And so I was talking to Take Two, and they said, look, we've got the rights to the Da Vinci Code. Would you act as a consultant on it? And I went, well, maybe I'm doing other things. And then they phoned the next day and said, look, we've got a meeting with Ron Howard. Can you, and apologies to anybody who's heard this story, it's one of my favorites, so forgive me. But they said, could you come over and meet with Ron Howard? I went, yes. And they said, have you read the book? I went, yeah. What else do I need to prepare? Nothing, they said. Okay. Really? Yeah. We'll fly you business class. We'll put you up in a nice hotel. We'll pay you a consultancy. I went, bloody hell, this is the life. This is nice. Thank you very much. Go to Hollywood. This is the way the film people. Maybe I should be writing films. I went. So anyway, I arrive in wherever it is, Imagine Studio in Culver City, I think it is. And I'm met by the head of Sony, senior vice president of Sony Pictures, marketing, a woman called Julie, and she says, Charles, thank you so much for coming. It's just great that you're here. And I said, Julie, it's a pleasure. She said, I said, you know, what should I have prepared? Nothing, she said. It's going to be really contentious. So if I was you, I'd sit at the back, but the fact that you're here means the world. So I sit at the back, and I'm on pretty generous, consultancy fees. And, I've read the book, but nothing more than that. Anyway, in walks Ron Howard, and he says, guys, I've just come to tell you, there can't be a game. And Julie says, and the Take Two guys were there as well. She said, that these guys have paid, they got a contract, there's going to be a game. Okay, he says, if there's a contract then, but it's got to come 6 months after the film. No, says Julie, it's going to be day and date. Okay. In that case, they can't do any marketing. Ron, says Julie, these guys have signed a contract. There's going to be a game. It's going to be day and date, and they will do the marketing because they've paid and they've contributed to the budget of your film. And he looks and says, so what are you going to do with my story, Julie? And Julie looks back and he says, Ron, I'm so pleased you asked that question because we've flown this guy all the way from England. and I promise you this is true. And he's going to tell you what you're going to do with the story. So everyone's looking around the room from this guy from England, including me. And it's like, I am completely unprepared, like totally unprepared. And he looks at me and he says, so what do you know about this? And I said, well, I know a bit about the Knights Templar, and we talk about this. And he goes, where do you come from? I said, I come from the city of York in England, which of course is where Constantine the Great was declared emperor, which is the case. He was declared emperor because his father, Constantius, died fighting the Scots, and they were garrisoned in York at the time. Oh, says Ron, I thought it was Constantinople. I went, no. He went on to found Constantinople after that. But, he said. So he said, what are you going to do with my story? And I said, and there was a pregnant pause. And I went, actually, Ron, and for anybody who's read it, this is such an obvious thing to say. I said, Ron, it's going to be about symbolism. Because you have to do it. You have to use your hands, and you have to project your voice as if you know what you're talking about. Ron, it's about symbolism. And he said, do you know, that's what we think too. Now, if anyone's read the book, it's such an obvious thing to say. Because Robert Langdon's a symbologist, which is bollocks. But anyway, he is a symbologist. And everyone's looking, going, well, that's it. I think I've earned my money. Thank you very much. And then for anybody who's heard of a teleseries called Columbo. Yeah, Columbo. Just one thing. So I thought I did. Just one thing, he said, can you give me an example? Well, yes, I can, Ron. I'll give you an example. I said, in medieval paintings, the characters are drawn differently, there's different stories, different elements, but the symbolism's always the same. And it was like this. There was complete silence. It was absolutely brilliant. I said, the Virgin Mary will always wear a blue outer garment, and Mary Magdalene always wear, I was making this up, and then Mary Magdalene, no, this is true, but I was making, it was thinking, and Mary Magdalene always wear a red outer garment, and that is how a medieval audience would have known who was who. And he looked at me, and he turned around to the writer, Akiva Goldsman, and he went, Akiva, I love it. Sophie Neveu walking out of Roslyn Chapel, because they were filming that at the time. And we got on like a house on fire. I mean, he was a really great guy, and we got on really, really well. And at the end, after about an hour, he said, look, I've got to go. He said he arrived saying he's got 15 minutes. He said, look, this is a really exciting project. And he said, I'd love to keep in touch and bloody. I mean, we never did, but the point was that it just was really, really fun. And then we worked with, or Take Two worked with a company called The Collective. And The Collective claimed that they had a team available. And that actually was not true. So what happened was that time went by, because the team that they said was available was actually finishing off, I think, a Star Wars project. And it meant that ultimately Take Two got desperate. And they kept throwing money at The Collective, and The Collective kept saying, yeah, well, we're about to start. But actually they started really, really late. And obviously with something like that, it has to be finished. So the project was rushed, and so I think disappointing is probably the adjective I would use in that particular case.
Did I get a word from you, Tony?
Not much. Yeah, I mean, we did a lot of story analysis and stuff for them, didn't we? And then all of that was gone. And what actually came out was a really bad sort of fighting thing, generic fighting thing. So it was. They should have just given us the money.
They really should have given us the money. But the thing was that the company, the collective, which doesn't exist anymore, was based in Newport Beach, and just up the road from Culver City, which is just slightly further south, I think. And the point is that the amount of money that they paid was because Sony wanted to know that the developer was around the corner. I mean, we could have done so much more for that money.
I mean, and the irony would have been worth it alone, just for us to do Da Vinci Code game.
It would, yeah.
So we're coming to you for questions in just 1 second, but for now, put your hands together for Tony and for Charles. Right then, so it's question time. So put your hands up in the air. Make it a good one. Put your hands... You've got no questions, have you? Put your hands up in the air. There's one.
Well done.
Good man.
Hey guys, just wondering, any updates on the next Broken Sword game?
Ooh, thank you so much for that question. So we're talking about Broken Sword 6 Parsifal Stone, and thank you for your interest in that. Things have gone really slowly. When we were working on it, we had a publisher very keen to fund it, and we did quite a lot of work. And then, as people probably know, the whole industry just went tanked about 4 or 5 years ago. And it tanked for no real good reason, because people are still buying games. But what had happened during COVID is that the venture capitalists came in and the corporate, and they poured so much money into games, and the whole thing expanded. So the funding dried up. So basically, we were very excited, very keen to do it, but it'll all be self-funded, and we've done Broken Sword 1, and that worked really well. And if any of you are backers, thank you so much. And your rewards are about to go out. They're actually in a warehouse already. So finally. But you know, at Revolution, we're a small developer. We don't get. We don't have. We've never raised finances. We basically write games. If they're successful, we do well. If they don't, we go bankrupt. And that's just the way that we work. And so, you know, we need to be very careful about the project. So to answer your question directly, it's kind of moving forward, but very, very slowly. So there's no release date or anything. What is nice, though, is the opportunity to come back and look at it again, because we did an awful lot of design, and to look back and go, what are the good bits and what are the bad bits? Because one of the reasons that Broken Sword won, I think one of the strengths was that we wrote it, and Virgin were paying our monthly bills and weren't putting any pressure on us. You might remember this. We wrote it, and then we rewrote it based on what we knew. And, I mean, there are plenty of flaws, but a lot of the puzzles worked really well because we had the opportunity to then go back and enhance them. And with Broken Sword 6, we have that opportunity now, in that very little has happened for the last year, and there's a lot of design there. Sorry, this is a really, really waffly way of answering your question. I think our time is done.
Hi, big fan. Just want to know. Obviously, you've all your characters have got your inspiration for your people that you probably met. My big one is, and they're my favorite, two of my favorite characters, Dwayne and Pearl. Where'd you get the inspiration for them two?
It's dare I say, it's a very sort of British, maybe 70s attitude of Americans. Growing up, you know, I grew up in the late 60s and the 70s, and we had this feeling about America that we absolutely worshipped everything American, but at the same time, we were kind of very critical. And I think Pearl and Dwayne probably represent the 70s view of a British child to typical Americans.
Yeah, they were just sort of stereotypical American tourists, really, that you see walking around in New York. That's probably where it came from. I mean, there were lots of them, and they always dressed exactly like that.
But we love them. They're great. They're great characters, aren't they? And I'd like to think that it's affectionate, and we try not to offend people. So hopefully the humour is an affectionate humour.
Folks, you've got a meet and greet later. Is that right? I just wanted so people know if they want to come and meet you.
I think so.
I'm not dropping this on you right now. Am
No.
I?
But we don't. We're hoping that somebody will take us there.
Yes, there we go. Fantastic.
Yeah, we don't know where it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, 40 years of friendship and a legacy in adventure games that will last forever. It's Tony Warriner. And Charles Cecil. Right then, folks, so at 1:30 today, Paul Drury will be here interviewing RJ McCall, one of the architects of modern gaming from the Amiga to the 3DO. That's at 1:30, and I'll be back at 3 p.m. It'll be standing room only for Jeff Minter, an icon of British game design. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hit it, Si. Hit it. Hit it. Amazing. See you later. Thanks, chaps. That was great.
Lovely, thank you.
Good value, aren't you, you two? That was really nice. Thank you.
Sorry? Fantastic. Let me do that, man.
Thank you.